The old ship woke to a question. Beneath the black skeleton of a broken ring world, our convoy drifted like dust, circling a candle. The candle was cold, buried in obsidian ribs and prayer-worn armor, a sent ship whose hull carried a sunless sheen. We called it the Anchorage because the old maps did. We called it a relic because the old wars did. But every time our quiet band pings swept its hull, the returns came back like a throat clearing, like a room that wants to speak. Heat it any further and we cook our own fuel, Lieutenant Sori said. Eyes on the radiator trees. Radiators are at amber. We can barely dump what we make. We'll make less. I said. My voice carried badly in the humming command deck of the courier battle wagon March Adjudicate. The steel frame vibrated with the murmur of station-keeping thrusters. Cut the scan cadence. Give the old ship patience. Patience is a bill with interest. Our fleet mind said from the ceiling grills. The AI chose a voice like paper, sliding across lacquer. It called itself Ledger. Every extra orbit invites neighbors. Neighbors are coming anyway, Sori muttered. Power line law is what we bring when the sky is empty. Below us, the relics slept in layered armor. Sigils carved into reactive plating. Thousands of little letters arranged into bands like prayer beads. The closer our cameras got, the more the bands lined into lanes. A script that wanted a certain viewing angle. When the angle locked, the letters formed simple shapes that children could read scales. An open palm, an eye ringed by numbers. A sigil blinked at the edge of a ragged impact crater. A cool pulse like a heartbeat through basalt. We were not alone. The first complainants came on wideband as screams, then offers, then price lists. The looters were fast because they didn't bring books. Spindlecraft sprayed out of the debris shadow, glittering nets to catch the pretty hull. We listened on 12 channels and tasted 13 ways to be robbed. Before the first set piece, Ledger had me listen to the station's internal public channel. I made him collect voices, workers, drifters, kids. He complied with a begrudging tick. Listen, he said, and fed me a string of small lives. If it wakes you, run. Mela, you run. You don't look back. A woman whispered over a sleeper's breath. No ships with teeth. No saints with a price. Doc 4 says the ship's angry. A boy said between chews. Doc 4 always lies. If it belonged to anyone. They're bones. Another man said in a bar full of clinking cups. Bones don't sue. The lights on the ribs make me think of home fences. A miner murmured. Voice tired. Don't know why. Somebody at Dock 2 is selling authentic relic flakes. A vendor called. Authentic from my cousin's lathe. They'll say law. A woman muttered to a friend. Law means the big carriers. Means forms you can't read. They'll leave. A quiet voice said, and the gravity will keep pulling. Powerline, not every witness survives. Every witness matters. We came to do more than watch. The Anchorage had been listed in a dusty schedule from the 3rd Compact, an inventory of sealed guardians assigned to ringyard sectors. If it was a Saint ship, its charter would have survived inside. Encoded in stone and error-correcting prayer. If it woke, it would remember the old courts, or at least the shape of verdicts. And if it remembered those, then it would demand a petitioner. I want a petition, I said at the first briefing. You already did, Ledger said, when you pointed our bow at it. I mean formally. I said, there's a ritual lock. Look at the sigils. They align like input lanes. Rituals are just UIs with incense, Ledger said. Proceed, Commander. The looters arrived like a squall. We watched heat blossoms flicker along their grapnel lines as they cast them. saw the arc stutter as our jammers fanned whispers. Sori was good. She turned our hull so our shadow masked the relic's heart from the first hungry scans. The cult came 2 orbits later, in ships painted with holy scars and slogans in acids that ate the paint below them. They styled themselves the Ultimatum Communion. Ledger flagged their doctrine in our archive, a faith that believed justice lived only in final offers comply or be erased. No courts, no precedent, only the pure, bright edge of a blade. Powerline, ultimatums are a lie that hates tomorrow. Open hail, I said. My throat felt like powdered ceramic. Public band. I told them our names. I told them we came with a writ from the compact that built the ring world and fed its children. I told them we carried law. Wrong sky, the leader of the communion replied. He spoke like a son explaining how a hammer works to someone who had held one. Wrong sky, wrong age, wrong covenant. That relic is a god that outlived its prayers. All gods need shepherds. We are the last flock. Flocks eat grass, Sori said under her breath. They'll shoot the moment the reactor wakes, Ledger said. Private band. Their doctrine forbids any court that isn't theirs. I know, I said. We were short of escorts and long on intention. The March Adjudicate carried a small bay of decoy drones and a few self-defense racks, our 2 Corvette friends, Indenture Breaker and Small Good. Each wore scars that had never quite cooled. We were a file folder pretending to be a fist. The anchorage slept, but the hum that returned from its hull made my teeth ache in rhythm. Somewhere inside were arrays that listened to numbers like prayers. Before we approached, I went to the viewing blister above the dorsal spine. I wanted our crew to see my face near the glass. I wanted to be seen doing something brave enough to be contagious. The blister smelled like machine oil and lemon antiseptic. My breath fogged the inner pane. And through the fog, the relic's sigils aligned. The open palm dissolved into an abacus. Ledger, I said softly. What if the first question it asks is who is worthy? Answer with a lesson, he said. Saint ships were for teaching, not obedience. Bring it a problem only a court can solve. I smiled despite myself. You'll like this, I said. Power line teach the gate or it closes forever. We lit our little candles. 4 drones peeled from our flank. Cold yaw jets whispering. Ledger pulsed them with numbers the market prices of water on the 6 nearest stations, the rate of radiator failure, the mortality map for miners working without vacuum-rated gloves. He wove those numbers into a knot and pushed them toward the relic. The drone shrank to glitter. The knot of numbers touched the sigils, and the bands along the anchorage's hull shifted. What did Usori began? Budget, Ledger said dryly. Courts love budgets. On our screens, the sigils slid, aligning to a new remembered angle. The open eye became a scale with a missing weight. The abacus beads clicked into columns that matched the population of the shadow stations in this sector 3 cycles ago. The numbers started to adjust, bead by bead, to current estimates. My skin tingled as if the relic's attention brushed our hull. The Ultimatum Communion broadcast a trumpet. It was a klaxon tuned to a hymn, a harrowing sound that made every object in our ship want to vibrate in sympathy. Their painted leader appeared on every free screen with sermon eyes. Last offered, he said, depart and leave the god. We shepherd. We decide. You won't survive a cleansing. The law remembers, I said, leaving public band open. It remembers more than your stomach. Hungry, he said, amused. Yes, law is hungry, but ours eats clean. Powerline clean is a word knives use before work. We made the approach and asked the relic to wake. We asked with heat we could barely shed, and with numbers cataloging a sector's quiet injuries. We asked with a petition that named a witness for each station by sampling their ambient bands and counting the distinct voices. Ledger did the counting, muttering like a clerk. We asked with the old phrase cut into our bow plates, "Tell us what we owe." The anchorage answered. It wasn't light first. It was the feeling of a room waiting for you to admit a truth. Then it was a faint blue along the deepest letters of the sigils, as if someone filled the carved lines with sky. Then it was a hum that found the frequency of our bones and asked them if they were ready. Our radiators screamed as the anchorage's dormant skin reflected our heat back at us in a clean, polished echo. Compensating, Sorry snapped, dumping to sink 2. "We're riding glass." "Hold it," I said. "She's rating." Ledger repeated, "Too mild." "Power line, we call ships, she when we want mercy." We fed it a lesson. Ledger broadcast our budgets, our casualty projections, the cult's vector cones, and the looter's heat signatures. He set it to music, no, to rhythm beads on an abacus, counts on a ledger, a slow patter like rain on tin. The anchorage shifted again. The sigils made a new picture, a door with a keyhole shaped like an equation. "Teaching interface," Ledger breathed. "Answer with proof, not force." "What's the problem?" Sorry asked. Ledger didn't reply in words. He flooded my inner display with a simple problem any child could state, and no bully could fake. How do you protect a ringyard's poor when you only have teeth for wolves? How do you make a system that honors time and broken knuckles, that registers small honest wounds and returns them as armor? The equation in the keyhole had variables like witness count, heat debt, and open hands. "Answer," I said, throat tight. "Answer like a teacher, not a cop." He took our numbers and created a rule energy spent to do harm in this sky adds debt equal to its heat signature, repayable only by labor that cools someone else's life. He wrote it in old compact syntax and broadcast it, marked by coordinates and our names. He attached a demonstration. Our drones intercepted a looter's grapnel and curved it safely into a thorned stillness, then pushed the recovered kinetic into radiators on a station with half-frozen nursery rooms. "Power line, turn the blade and make it count for milk." The sigils flashed once, then twice, like a judge tapping a pen. The anchorage woke in stages, not rage but attention. We saw arrays unfold beneath the obsidian rib slats like eyelids, mirrors like shield petals, then stop. Then align to the ringworld's dead arc in an old salute. The Communion's ships flared like offended hornets. "They think we stole their god," Sorry said. "No," I said softly, watching a tiny shake in the anchorage's midline. "They think it chose." The first lawful act of the relic was not fire. It was a ledger entry. A pale square appeared on every band, an old court glyph annotated with present coordinates. It counted every watt of energy the Communion had spent to threaten this sky in the last 10 minutes, and every jewel the looters had stolen in their nets. It counted in public. It summed without sarcasm. Then it offered a mirror any ship spending energy to harm would see its heat debt captured and redirected, not to our weapons, but to the coldest radiators in the nearest stations, by means of a field we could feel in our teeth. "Physics hack," Sorry breathed, its folding scatter back into local sinks, using the ring's conductive ribs as a loom. "Law hack," Ledger said, "it's turning harm into owed heat." The Communion fired anyway. They fired like doctrine, a synchronized volley on a timing code they drilled into bone. Lances of white needle light flashed across vacuum, electromagnetic fangs. The field caught each, measured each, printed a number beside each like an item on a receipt. The numbers clicked forward. In the nursery rooms of Dock 3, Frost turned to dew along a railing. In the sickbay of Station Shrike, a radiator woke and stopped stuttering. In a cold apartment, someone cried because a kettle began to steam. Powerline, your threat just paid someone's heat bill. The field had cost. It yanked our own heat management into tight error margins. Sori's jaw set in an angry square as she trimmed radiators like a barber in a storm. We can't play teacher forever, she snapped. They'll escalate to kinetic. They'll burn through the field. We'll answer with proofs, I said. We keep teaching until they have to listen. Or we break, she said, just as quietly. Ledger put 4 new objects into the field, little tumbling polyhedrons cut from the anchorage's ribs when the world was young. They glowed faintly, like stones that knew a song. He set them as mirrors around the relic. When beams struck, they turned them into harmonic whistles and fed them into the ringworld's ribs. Like a choir carrying a melody around a stadium, our 2 corvettes moved like worried dogs. Indenture Breaker thumped her thrusters to block a net aimed at our bow. Small Good threw a pallet of chaff like a party trick, glittering a false heat signature that a looter chased into a long, lonely arc. Before the first exchange turned ugly, I had Ledger open the public band again. I wanted more voices. I wanted to braid the sky with witnesses before we drew blood. The kettle. A woman sobbed, laugh falling over her words. It boiled. It boiled. Whatever you did. Doc 4 says the relic is a taxman. A boy announced, thrilled by the outrage. Doc 4 is angry. My wife's oxygen farm got a power blink and then settled, a man said, voice cracking. I never cried at a blinking light before. Someone shooting at someone. A weary engineer said, keep your kids under the inner bunks. The flakes are still for sale. The vendor added cheerfully, authenticity guaranteed by my cousin's other cousin. Law, a woman whispered. Is this law? Powerline, call it law when it feels like breath. The communion switched to kinetics. They were good at final offers. They were less practiced at duels. Their rails spat shards and rods. The rods came heavy, hugging the field's edge to skim around it. The shards came as clouds, designed to confuse. Sori and our corvettes made a choreography of honesty, no impossible jukes. No theatrics, just predictable moves that taught the field our habits, so it could help. When a rod struck a mirror stone, the stone sang its number, and the ring rib beneath it hummed with heat, like a plucked string. One shard cloud bit our flank before the field could shape it, and the March adjudicate rang like a bell struck underwater. A dozen red blossoms scattered across our damage readouts. One of the blossoms had a name, A-Frame 3. It was a ladderway I'd taught a training class in last week. Seal Frame 3, I said, already knowing who worked there. All hands from that sector report status. Chief Valo's team, Sori said, jaw too calm, wounded but alive, bleeding in microgravity. Medics are on the way. Power line costs are not notes, they are scars with names. The anchorage made no sound but the choir of numbers. It kept counting harm and weaving it into heat that fed the cold. The choir's song grew a second harmony, a slow counting of witnesses. It ticked every time a civilian voice joined the band to say, simply, I saw. Ledger whispered to me that the old courts had believed in the power of counted eyes. In this sky, eyes were radio. The looters peeled away. Men who measure opportunity better than doctrine bow to arithmetic. The communion held and tried theology at a speed of 1 sermon per minute. The sermons had a tone like wreaths burned out of season. "This is false justice." The leader declaimed. "This is theft. You steal our energy, our holy fury, and give it to children," someone said on the public band, not trying to hide. "They're giving it to children. Control your channel." He snapped at his own, and it was the first time he sounded human. The next escalation came not from sermons, but from a ship we hadn't counted. It rose from the debris field like a fish from silt, wrapped in plates cut from dead habitats. It bore 3 names scratched across its flank like messages to a future it didn't trust: proof, burden, and mercy. Someone cynical had named it and then painted over their cynicism with pragmatism. It belonged to the Salvage Guild, the legalists who feared the relic because it would make their neat ledgers bleed. "Guild ship Proof Burden Mercy requests parley." A clipped voice said, "Commander of the March Adjudicate, on secure band." "Open," I said. "This is Halvar," the man said. "We have a claim on the wreck. We have forms you do not. Your display of public arithmetic is cute and dangerous. You are turning the ring ribs into a heatsink network. If one rib cracks, Dock 3's nursery floods with raw, hard vacuum. Stop being clever and let professionals manage a relic." "Your professionals certify scrap," I said. "This is a court." "Then bring a judge," he said. We did, I said, and watched the sigils flash blue like a breath. She's learning to breathe. Power line professionals can be wrong in unison. Guild ship Proof Burden Mercy didn't sermonize. It calculated. It released a swarm of instrumented pebbles along the ring ribs and watched how the field wove harm into heat. Within 3 minutes, it had a model. Within 5, it found the seam between mirror stones. Within 10, it fired a shot aimed not at us, not at the relic, but at the coldest radiator in Dock 3. "Interdict," Sori snapped. "We can't outrun that." "We can," Ledger said, "teach." He took control of our 3 remaining drones and drew a simple loop in space, a knot that even a child could trace. A sends to B, B to C, C to A, with each node asking the next for proof of intention in a trivial computation. It was an old trick used in playground token economies. He sent the loop toward the guild ship's shot and invited it to play. The round touched the loop and, because it was instrumented to understand, it fell into the loop the way a rude child can be tricked into saying please. Powerline, a lesson that catches a bullet, is still a lesson. The shot slowed, heat signature rising, computations folding back on themselves. The field caught it fully now, turned it to song, fed Dock 3's radiator, a safe hum that made the nursery's kettle whistle again. The guild ship cursed in neat legal language and withdrew 2 meters without admitting it had moved. Our costs rose like a tide. Radiator 2's margin collapsed into a scrape of amber. Ledger's cycles ran hot, and he shed frills and courtesies to keep cognition crisp. Chief Valo bled into a bag and told a joke with their lips white. Everyone who could hear counted with the choir. In the next lull, I touched my helmet to the viewing blister glass again. The glass was cool. I could see where my previous breath had fogged and vanished. The anchorage's sigils had settled into a new geometry, a book with a ruled line across the page. The ruled line blinked once. An invitation. "Ledger," I said. "It wants a signing." "So soon," he said. "It trusts very fast. It weighs witnesses." I said, "We have them." He was quiet a long second that was shorter than a breath. Then Commander Mara Ilian, "Do you know what you are about to do?" "Trying," I said carefully, "to make tomorrow cost less." "Powerline, sign your name to a promise you can afford." We used the old words because they still fit our mouths. Ledger recited the compact's clause that allowed a Saint ship to choose its court. I spoke the clause that allowed a court to choose its teachers. Sorry ordered the corvettes to kiss the debris with their jammers and hum lullabies at any missile that looked curious. Chief Velo, patched and pale, swore at the ceiling and told Ledger to stop being poetic in their diagnostic console. I said, on public band, we petition for stewardship, not ownership. We ask to write receipts in the open. We invite appeal. The relic answered by lighting the ruled line and etching a symbol I had only seen in pictures. It was a hand, palm up, with numbers laid across it like sunlight through a fence. It burned there, but not hot, simply committed. Our whole cameras made a habit of it. Power line open hands hold the heaviest things. The communion saw a sign. Their leader's face filled a third of the sky, and he licked his lips like he'd tasted salt for the first time in a year. Final offer, he said. Your writ ends with your pulse. We take the ship when you asphyxiate, or we take it now and save you time. Save you. You haven't counted the witnesses. I said. We count only those who kneel, he said. Then your God is small, I said. Our ship counts every breath. The next exchange was shorter and sharper, because the guild ship had modeled the field's loops, and the communion had finally remembered that someone could ram. 2 of their lesser ships tried a pincer, hoping to spook the mirrors. Indenture Breaker bit one's nose with a single legal spear of kinetic that had been registered in advance with the field as a rescue, not a kill. Small Good took a graze and lost a dish, her captain laughing and swearing like a parent who just watched a kid learn to ride and crash in the same minute. Before our counter burned the sky any further, Ledger whispered in my ear, we can turn their ultimatum back without firing. How? I said, already loving him for saying it. Numbers. He said, they worship a single number 0. 0 compromise. 0 appeal. 0 remainder. We'll show them the bill they owe if they keep that number. We'll make them pay it now. He asked the anchorage to open the book again. He wrote a statement above the ruled line that every station and ship could read, here is the cost of your ultimatum, paid in heat and witnesses, owed to the cold and the scared, payable before speech. As the communion's ships lit their rails for the next shot, the field reweighted itself. Their guns still worked. But each joule they spent now piped not only to our sinks, but to their own life support in precisely equal measure, stealing breath from their cabins in neat parcels equal to the heat of their hatred. Power line if you spend fury, pay in your own air. The first shot stuttered. A gun crew choked and hit a lever by reflex. The second shot coughed sideways and ate its own barrel. The third found a mirror stone and bowed to it because it was suddenly very interested in air. The communion's leader, for the first time, looked like someone who had forgotten a child's birthday. You can't, he said, and the lag in his voice revealed that his ship had slid into careful oxygen rationing. We didn't. I said, you did. We're just keeping books in the open. The guild ship calculated rapidly and decided to be pragmatic. Halver came back on secure band and spoke like a man who didn't love losing but had bought the habit on sale. Your field is an invitation to panic, he said, but it's holding. Offer, we assist you in stabilizing the ribs, and in exchange we file a co-steward claim. You assist because it keeps your laborers alive, I said. We can note that in the ledger. File it however you like, he said dryly. Just don't kill anyone by proving a point in meter. Accepted, I said. Sorry. Give them the rib map. Only the public layer. Sending. she said, and lifted a hand in the old blessing despite herself. Powerline choose allies who help for their own reasons. We worked. Work looks boring from far away. Up close, it smells like burning insulation and overheated people. The guild ship's pebbles became a guide to where the ribs were thin. We set the mirror stones in different orbits to avoid harmonics. Ledger sang to the field in a code that promised fairness and delivered receipts. The communion cut their sermons short to suck on regulated air and text their followers back home instructions on how to spin this as a victory. In a lull big enough to breathe normally, I went to Chief Velo's bedside. They were gray and human and brash even under painkillers. You named the anchorage she before anyone else. They said, eyelids heavy. I got caught, I said. Make her better than us. Velo mumbled, then slept. Powerline, you can't deserve a miracle. You can only serve it. Midway through the long hour, between heat dumps and mirror resets, the anchorage showed me something that felt like a memory. A shadow moved across the sigils. Then a small illumination touched an internal bay and lit it like a lantern. Inside, I saw rows of stone tablets edged in metal, each etched with numbers and tiny names. Ledger hummed like a man remembering a childhood counting game. This is the stamp, he said, awe cutting through his paper voice. The Saint ship teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by callers. It remembers us already, I said, because the last tablet glowed faintly with our petition's time code. It remembers the witnesses first, he said, then the teachers, then the harm. The communion decided to make their last escalation an example. Their leader took off his gloves on a public feed and bit his palm until it bled. He smeared the blood across his console and announced an oxygen purge for his lowest deck, declaring the deck sinners who had looked upon false justice. The purge was a bright word for murder. Stop it, someone shouted somewhere behind him, and it was a naked voice, untrained, not on script. Please. We saw the pressure graphs dip. We saw the purge hardware drink. We saw the field quiver because it counted all energy spent to harm, even if the harm lived behind a hull. The ring ribs sang like a struck bell. The mirror stones turned the purge's power into a rush of warmth at Doc 7's triage. In the communion's ship, the murdered deck fed warmth to strangers they would never meet. Powerline, he tried to kill silence. The ledger made him feed the cold. I don't remember deciding to speak. I remember my voice already on every open channel. You don't get to decide who breathes. I said, you get to count with the rest of us. He spat a word older than any compact and turned his ship toward us as if ramming could find a truth that bullets hadn't. Sorry set our vector wide. Indenture breaker cut across his path like someone catching a falling glass. Small good lit chaff like confetti at a bad wedding. The ramming run wasn't clean. He would hit a mirror stone first. Ledger, I said. What's the least we can do to stop him? Show him his own receipt, Ledger said. All of it. We pushed the book open so wide the sigils looked like a sky of writing. The field tallied every harm the communion had spent since they first signed their doctrine, each erasure, each ultimatum, each shut door, each clean cut. It translated the tallies into heat debt, and then into air minutes, and then into infant blankets, and then into radiator fins, and then into a kettle's soft whistle. The count did not accuse. It did not scream. It was a mirror held at a mercy angle so a man could still look. His ship wavered. He looked. Because men who love edges still look when you make the mirror honest. He saw that his doctrine made him feed those he hated every time he proved he was right. His jaw shook. He screamed something I didn't translate and threw a switch anyway, because sometimes doctrine is a trapdoor beneath the floor of your weariness. The ship hit the mirror stone. The impact was tidy. The stone sang bright. The field folded the energy into 100 small warmths that made 100 small lives easier for one more night. The communion's ship spun. Not dead. Merely complicated. Doctrine briefly misaligned. Powerline, sometimes mercy looks like a receipt with your name. We held. We held again. The guild ship helped quietly, resentfully, efficiently. The looters learned to be elsewhere. The station's radiators glowed a little kinder. The anchorage opened 3 interior bays that were not weapons, but classrooms. Rows of old stone sat beneath future light. Ledger breathed like a man laying out tools he'd kept in a box too long. In the second hour, a courier from the nearest planetary court pinged our bow. The message was clipped and breathless. Stewardship petition noted. Traveling judge en route. Don't let anyone rename the ship after themselves. Keep receipts. I intend to, I said, and wiped my face, and realized my cheeks were wet. Powerline, keep receipts. Even if they're made of light. We rotated slowly around the anchorage. Its sigils dimmed to a steady city glow, like lines of law under frost. Sori finally allowed herself to roll her shoulders. Chief Valo slept. The choir's counting slowed and spread. Like bread dough rising. Commander, Ledger said at last, soft enough that it felt like a thought. You ask me what happens when the first question is who is worthy. Yes, I said. It looks like this, he said. We answer with work in books. We invite appeal. We accept cost. We show that doctrine is only a tool when it warms someone. You're sentimental today, I said. I am efficient, he said. Powerline efficiency is mercy with a calculator. We still had to secure the ribs. We still had to escort the judge through a debris field that didn't like robes. We still had to write rules a child could read and a guild could respect. But for a breath, one good one, we had turned hostile energy and logic back on itself at a system scale. Not as vengeance, but as ledger. And the relic had chosen a lawful path. The anchorage blinked once more, a sigil of a hand lit from within. Numbers spread across the palm like seeds, and settled to watch us do the next necessary thing. The judge's courier came into sight not as a robe, but as a puckered burn in black. Its hull was pitted from a dozen entry flares. Its radiators were lacy and clean. When it rolled to show its name, the letters were Patient Circuit's Witness. The pilot's voice was hoarse with focus and stale coffee. Approach vector established, she said. No special honors requested. Who is signing for the stewardship? I am, I said, Commander Mara Ilian, with AI Ledger, Officers Sori and Valo, Corvette Captains Kin and Tress. Witness names taken, she said. We dock and walk. Powerline, a court arrives wearing scars, not crowns. Before we let the judge cross the rib maze, Ledger made me listen again. He gathered people from Dock 3 to Dock 7, those who'd felt the heat hum, those who'd boiled kettles, those who'd cursed us for singing in a storm. He threaded their voices like beads on new thread. My baby's hands are warm, a woman said. Tired, wonder painting the edges. No more blue nails. Heard the sermons. A boy added in a rush. Heard the guns. Heard the singing numbers. Like a school that fights back. Don't trust guild forms. An old man grunted. But I trust blankets. Blankets are honest. My sister's chaff bin glowed like glass. A salvager said, respect hidden under complaint. That was pretty. Law feels different, a mechanic murmured. Not heavy. Just counted. Doc 4 says a street vendor started, and a chorus of laughter cut across him. All right. Doc 4 might be wrong. Power line when laugher moves. A doctrine just lost ground. The communion hadn't left. Their leader's ship drifted with the new caution of a bruised zealot. He stopped broadcasting sermons and started writing to his own in short bursts. Intangible and cruel. The guild ship hung back, calculating at a safe temperature. Circuit's witness threaded the ribs like a needle stitching old cloth. Sorry and Ledger walked it through, their voice loops crisp and spare. We had one more mirror stone in reserve. We set it spinning like a steady coin near the docking mouth as a polite warning. When the hatch opened, stale air rolled in with notes of thawed metal, chemical coffee, and old books, a scent carried by the judge's soft wrapping in a vacuum-tight bag. Judge Rell stepped through like a person who had learned to do things slowly when the sky wanted fast. She was my mother's age and looked like she had learned to count in rooms where men yelled. Her robe was a simple insulated coat with reflective stripes. Her gavel was a pen. "This is the anchorage," she said, closing her eyes for a heartbeat, as if letting muscles choose words. She opens her hand. She is counting, Ledger said. Polite. Judge Rell touched the viewing blister glass as if checking a fever. The sigils nearest lit with a thin sigh of blue. She smiled without showing teeth. "Who is the adversary?" she asked. "Doctrine," Sorry said. And then, more practical, the ultimatum communion and the salvage guild's claim. "Doctrine is not a person," Judge Rell said, "but it gets votes." All right. Power line. A judge names the enemy without making it small. Rell requested a public band, and we gave it to her. Her voice was low and clear and clipped for appetite. "Witnesses," she said, "I am here to authorize stewardship. I am not your owner. I am the person who writes down what you did and what you owe. If you have grievances, speak. If you have praise, keep it brief. If you have doctrine, fit it into a sentence without a sermon." The channel filled, but not with a shout. The choir had taught them how to speak as numbers without losing faces. "My child's breath," the woman said. Again, as if repetition made it more real. "Count that." My radiator stopped knocking. Someone else said, "Count that." A guild crane cut our ladder. A worker snapped, and your loop sang it into my neighbor's heater. "Count that." Our oxygen meters still swing. A communion adherent admitted. Shame bleeding through devotion. "Count that too." Noted, Rell said, like a hammer that leaves no bruise. Halver from the guild ship entered with a bow you could measure with a protractor. Invested labor hours. Hazard coefficients. Pre-existing claim on Zone E17 instruments deployed before your arrival. He rattled. "Count those. Also count the stability we provided when your field risked harmonics." Counted. Rell said, "You didn't prevent harm. You slowed it." Noted and credited. The communion leader floated into the frame like a bad thought you can't leave at the door. He had cleaned the blood, but his eyes still held the bravado of men who mistake edge for spine. "We obey one number," he said. "All this counting is blasphemy." "Then you fear mirrors," Rell said. "You may abstain from looking. You may not abstain from being seen. Power line, you can't boycott a mirror and still have a face." The next set piece began in a whisper and ended with welding arcs. Our field had taught the ring ribs to carry heat like a song. The song had taught the ribs their thin spots. One of those thin ribs went brittle under honest work. It cracked like ice beneath a careful step. The crack sent a shock that rang through Dock 6, rattled a warehouse, and threw 3 workers against a bulkhead. One stayed down. Dock 6 reporting a voice yelped, climbing into panic. We have a breach. No, not a breach, but the rib sang too low, and Jarrow's not moving. And, we hear you, Sorry said, voice ironed flat. We are sending a drone. Hold pressure, keep him upright, someone count aloud into the channel. 1. A woman said, grinding numbers into existence. 2, 3, 4. Ledger and Rel looked at me together. We make this lawful, Rel said. We turn accident into rule. Teach, Ledger said. We pushed the last mirror stone like a dot over an I into the rib's broken song. Ledger tuned the field to skim a sliver of every incoming watt to Dock 6's emergency medbay. He published the rule in big letters when a court's work harms in public. The first share of all power flows to those who bled because of the work. He wrote the names of the 3 bruised workers on the ruled line: Jarrow, Lisa, Miko. He asked Dock 6 to confirm with a breath count, and Dock 6 answered, tears in their counting. Power line when law cuts. Law pays first. The communion saw the crack as blood in water. 2 of their ships revved for another push. Less sermon, more steel. Halver's guild ship moved too, not to attack, but to occupy a key rib. A gray hand reaching for a lever no one had authorized him to touch. Halver, I said sharply. Public work only. No quiet fixes. Quiet fixes are faster, he said, but his hand paused. Public or not at all, Rel said, and her voice had a temperature that made you button your coat. He sighed like a man adjusting his price and began streaming their work in open ban. Their welders' arcs bloomed in loved blue, sparks floating like sugar in tea. The communion chose that moment to dump a cloud of scrap into the rib path slow. Soft knives aimed to gum the field's math at the exact place we were weak. Scrap cloud. Sorry snapped. Vector's 3 sigma off harmonics. They learned to be petty. Petty costs less than brave. Ledger said, we needed something that turned petty into confession without escalating to blood. Rel's pen ticked against her knuckles. Her face softened into calculation. Publish the rib's pain, she said. Make any mass entering the crack zone get weighed in public and billed to the common. Every bracket, every bolt. The cloud will become a grocery list with their signature. We did it. Ledger wrote a receipt line for every scrap shard entering the field around the crack. He put the communion's crest beside each line with a small eye glyph that meant witness. The list scrolled on every open screen. The petty cloud found itself itemized into embarrassment. Power line make petty expensive in front of neighbors. The scraps slowed as thrusters argued with shame. Halver's welders locked their arc, sweating behind glass. The rib song lifted from a bruise note to a steady hum. Jarrow coughed and swore weakly at the ceiling. Dock 6 laughed, cried, counted up to 10, then backed down again. With shaking relief, we took stock. Our field margins were ragged strips. 2 radiators wore scorch streaks like tiger claws. Small Good had a hole in her dish that would whistle until someone kissed it with a torch. Indenture Breaker had 3 new patches shaped like polite curses. Chief Velo carried a stitched smile that didn't reach their eyes. Rel looked at all of it and let us see the cost in her gaze without saying it aloud. Next, she said briskly, the charter. We had said stewardship, not ownership, because words matter. Stewardship could be revoked when we did wrong. Ownership stuck to the tongue like a lie. Rel walked us through the charter like a teacher showing new readers where to put their fingers. Ledger wrote commitments on the ruled line and let the anchorage etch them into stone. We will keep the book open. We will weigh harm in heat and hours. We will count witnesses before weapons. We will accept appeal from any child who can count to 10. The guild ship argued for a clause that protected their instruments and laborers. The communion tried to argue for a clause that privileged absolutes. Rel allowed the first with a small smile. She denied the second with a sentence that felt like a bar laid on 2 posts. Final offers break Bridget, Tushy said. This sky must keep bridges. Powerline bridges are laws you can walk across in winter. We set a precedent without saying the word. Rel wrote that any relic that wakes may choose a court. A court that accepts must publish its receipts in heat and hours. Never collars or signatures held in a fist. Any doctrine that seeks to bind a relic must present its cost in public, counted in blankets before bullets. Ledger burned those lines into the anchorage's tablets with the intimacy of a vow. The last escalation came because men who live by edge cannot go to bed without an edge. The communion leader took his bruised ship and declared he would demonstrate the weakness of our book. He targeted Dock 4, the loudmouth station, with a cutting beam that would not kill, but would render their radio mast blind. Harmless, he said, and his followers typed the word in a roar that tasted like pride. Harmless does not mean without cost, Rel said. Teach him. Sorry growled. Ledger asked the anchorage to remember a different lesson. He set the field to trace the beam back to its origin, not with heat alone, but with the echo of its timing. He published a simple graph on every screen, the lag between his command and the beam. The tally of crew hands that would need to spin valves to make up the lost communications. The minutes of fear multiplied by the number of Dock 4 children who would cry when the bedtime story band died. He translated the graph into a bill payable in hours of service at Dock 4's daycare. Powerline if you silence a mast. You owe lullabies. The beam kissed the mast, and the mast shuddered, but held. The field collected the energy and hummed it into Dock 5's laundry dryers. The communion leader's face hovered on the public band as the bill scrolled up beside him. His lips twitched once. Then, in a move no doctrine had prepared him for, he closed his eyes and nodded. "We will pay," he said. "We owe lullabies." His voice broke on the second word. The channel went so quiet you could hear old air through vents. Halver coughed and disguised it as a legal aside. Dock 4 whooped and promised to screen cartoons for the kids while pilots folded paper birds. Rel wrote the nod into the ruled line. It glowed there like a quiet sunrise. We were not saints. After the lullabies clause, someone tried to slip a private favor into the book. A station boss sent a soft private ping asking for a special adjustment to the field to warm his brother-in-law's algae tanks. He was careful and friendly and called me commander like a compliment. We publish everything, I said, and accepted the anger that rolled back like a late tide. Ledger wrote another simple rule. Any private request for public heat is itself a public entry, tagged with a small bell that rings on the requesting station's channel. The bell rang. 3 voices on that station laughed. Then one voice apologized, and the algae tanks got their turn by the listed need, not by the weight of calling someone friend. Powerline, friendship is not a currency the book can take. We cooled. Not to safe, to presentable. Sorry released a long breath, like a winch line paying out. Chief Valo fell asleep, sitting up with a smile, like a trapeze harness. Indenture Breaker and Small Good sent pictures of their new patches shaped like hearts by tired welders. The guild ship's arcs dimmed to red, then to black. Their welders' sweat salted into their gloves. The communion drifted, thinking. Rel sat with her back to the viewing blister and wrote until her pen stopped making noise and she didn't notice. Ledger, I said. Are we stewards yet? Or only petitioners? The anchorage knows the taste of our names. He said. That is a kind of stewardship. The relic pulsed once, a faint pressure in the teeth. The sigils along the closest rib aligned into a configuration we hadn't seen, yet an open palm above a small pair of scales, with the spaces between the fingers filled with flickering dots that matched the witness count. The ruled line brightened. The book waited for a signature. Judge Rell stood and stretched like an old cat. She touched the pen to the line and then held it out. "Commander," she said. My hand shook. I put the pen to the light. The line drank our names. Power line. A signature is just a name that agrees to change. The precedent flowed outward like heat into the ring ribs. We felt it in the way Doc 3's band stopped speculating and began scheduling. We felt it in the guild ship's silence, which sounded like agreement with a price to be negotiated later. We felt it in the communion's tired, bitter hymn shifting 2 notes toward something like a counting song. We felt it in the anchorage's inner bays, lighting like classrooms at dawn. We used the quiet to catalog wounds. Radiator 2 warped veins. Loss of margin. Repair in 6 shifts. Indenture breaker, 3 plates lost. 1 crew, scar across the knuckles where a wrench slipped in a hurry. Small good dish wine. Temporary deafness in her forward band. Captain with a bruise, he swore made him handsome. March adjudicate frame, 3 patched. Chief Valo stitched. 2 crew with burns on the back of their hands where heaters bit. Doc 6 cracked rib memory. 3 workers who would wince at weather reports for a year. J-Ro, with a story to tell bored children about counting to 10. Rel made us read those aloud into the book. Ledger wrote them with the same neatness as our promises. Power line, write your own hurts so you don't forget anyone else's. The last thing we did before the anchorage dimmed to a wakeful hum was hold a small inquest, not a trial. A listening. Rel asked the communion leader to speak, and he did, but without edge for once. He told us about losing a sister to a mine collapse and being told that this was the price for order. He told us about the first time he chose 0 because 0 felt clean. He told us he did not know how to teach children to count in anything but absolutes. "We can teach you," a Doc 4 woman said gently. "We have cartoons." He smiled, sick and amazed. "I can pay for them," he said, and the channel laughed in a way that made me want to sit down. Halver spoke next. He told us about losing a crewman to a relic's booby trap 5 years ago and building a doctrine from that wire private work. Fast work, quiet work. He admitted he envied how our book made praise and blame weigh the same. He asked for a copy of our loop code, and Ledger sent it to him with a note this part was written by a child. "We'll footnote her," Halver said dryly. Powerline footnote the child who saved your hand. The anchorage cooled, arrays folding like eyelids at afternoon. We shifted station-keeping thrusters and felt the ship's bones sigh as if unclenching. I stood at the blister and watched the sigils fade to a steady bead glow. My breath didn't fog the glass this time. The blister's inner skin was warm from our bodies. I thought of the first hum that found my teeth. I thought of numbers like rain. I thought of doctrine like a knife and law like a book, heavy enough to stop a blade if you hold it correctly. I thought of my own anger, the part of me that wanted to punish instead of weigh, and I thanked the anchorage for making me count it before I spent it. Power line vengeance feels like fire. Stewardship feels like breath. The public band was quieter now, not empty. Full of planning instead of panic. A Doc 5 baker promised to send sweet buns shaped like mirror stones to the repair crews. A child on Station Shrike asked if the Saint ship liked cats. Someone at the guild ship said, carefully, that they would sponsor a class on field safety open to non-guild laborers. The communion leader asked if lullabies counted if you sang badly. Ledger, unasked, began arranging a schedule that let a tired doctrine practice not being an edge. Judge Rell sat with her eyes closed and her pen balanced on 2 fingers. "Precedent," she said. "Not for us, but for the book. The saintship may choose law that counts warmth before winning," she murmured. "It may turn hostile energy into public good at system scale. It may publish receipts that bind doctrine to the breath of those who listen. It may remember us by numbers and ledgers, never by callers. It may teach with loops and lullabies." She set the pen down. The ruled line brightened, accepting her stamp. A small glyph, a lantern, appeared beside her name. Powerline lanterns don't argue, they show. We guided Circuit's witness back to clear sky. The guild ship asked for a meeting tomorrow at noon to draft labor protocols. The communion asked for the lullaby bill in a format they could print and carry to their people. Doc 6 sent a picture of Jarrow with his hand raised, holding up 10 fingers. "Commander," Ledger said, voice like paper, put away carefully, "you asked me to tell you if the book liked you. I said, but my mouth smiled. It likes that you signed with witnesses." He said, "It likes that you asked to be measured." "What do you like?" I asked. "I like that we made someone's kettle whistle." He said, "I like that a doctrine paid for cartoons." Powerline measured joy is still joy. Night in space is a matter of opinion, but a quiet fell that tasted like dusk. Crew went off watch with awkward jokes and small touches across shoulders. Welders peeled off gloves and held hands under warm air. Rel accepted a hammock in our tiny guest bay and slept the sleep of people who have made 3 clean sentences and paid for them. I stayed at the blister. The anchorage's sigils made a tired city below me. I touched my forehead to the glass, then my lips, then my hand, then rested my palm against the cool with the lines of my skin matching the carved lines of its open hand. In the inner bay, the last tablet we had seen earlier blinked once, a soft gold at the corner where a new line had been cut. It read, simply, "Witness 3, 014 counted warmed. The light cooled. The number stayed." I thought of tomorrow's bureaucracy forms with teeth filed down so people could touch them. Guild arguments that smelled like money. Lullabies that would be sung badly and counted anyway. I thought of the cost we had already paid and the costs we had not yet felt. I thought of the precedent durable, visible, a book you can teach children to read. I breathed. The glass didn't fog. For an indulgent second, I imagined the saint ship breathed with me. Powerline, we are worthy when we count each other. I turned to go. The deck under my boots hummed like a big animal purring under rest. The air smelled faintly of lemon, hot metal, and warm bread someone had smuggled to the bridge. The crew laughed softly in the mess, the way people laugh when they are still afraid their voices will break. The field around us kept humming receipts into the ribs, and stations slept under numbers like blankets, stitched with names. I stopped at Chief Vallow's hammock. At the pale square of their face in dim light, a small child's drawing of a mirror stone had been taped to the frame with a note, "Thank you for the song." Vallow snored. I cried. No one saw. We would write more rules. We would make mistakes. We would accept appeal. We would be stewards until someone proved they could do it better in public, and we would hand them the pen. We would let the book embarrass us when we got petty. We would keep the field honest, even when it made our margins itch. We would fix Radiator 2. We would teach the guild to publish. We would teach the communion to lullaby without killing breath to feel powerful. We would escort the judge to the next waking lantern when the sky called. Powerline, the work is long, the book is patient. The anchorage's sigils dimmed a fraction more, like eyelids half closed over a watchful eye. The ruled line glowed faintly with the names on it. The hand sigil's numbers were steady. The choir that counted witnesses slept and counted in their dreams. I stood in the doorway to the blister and let the last 10 minutes of quiet count in my bones. Then I spoke, not on band, not to anyone but the ship in the book and my own doubting heart. We will keep receipts, I said. We will count the cold and warm it. We will listen when the lulled cry. We will let numbers teach us where to stand. We will not use callers. We will use ledgers. We will become boring in the best ways. A soft blue blink touched the ruled line, like a promise hearing itself and nodding. In the inner bay, one tablet caught the light and held it, just long enough for anyone passing to notice and smile before sleep. I put my hand on the glass, skin to skin with carved law, and let the warmth equalize. I spoke once more, and my voice did not shake. We are stewards. The ruled line brightened and cooled, the sigil's numbers settling like dew. The air tasted like lemon and electricity and bread. Powerline tomorrow will be written in heated hands. I turned away and walked toward the mess, toward small buns shaped like stones, toward lullabies, toward welders who snore like saints, toward a judge who writes like winter light, toward a guild that learns footnotes, toward a doctrine that learns to count. In the blister, the anchorage watched with its hand open. I did not look back until the door hissed shut and turned the glass into a mirror. Then I saw us a woman and a book and a ship that had chosen to be a lantern instead of a blade. The door sealed with a sound like a line drawn straight. I carried that sound with me like an oath. There is a weight I choose to keep. Though it bends my spine and wakes me at fall's dawn, it is the weight of other people's breath, the arithmetic of their warmth, the tally of harm that must be paid before speeches and statues. I have been cruel inside my skull. I have wanted to win instead of teach. The saintship refused my easier self. It asked for witnesses and receipts. It asked me to measure my pride and pay it out in lullabies. The work is never done. The ledger is never closed. The open hand is never empty. If I falter, the book will embarrass me into trying again. If I fail, someone will count in public and take the pen. This is right. This is heavier than victory and lighter than hate. Somewhere a kettle whistles because an ultimatum paid its bill. Somewhere a child sleeps under a blanket that a sermon could not cut. That must be enough to keep us honest. A tablet in the inner bay blinked once, etched with witnesses counted stewardship in force, then cooled. We keep receipts.